How's it going, ladies and Bruces? I'm Bobby Sixkilla. Welcome back to Sekimeiya. We are rocking glasses today because I'm struggling with seeing the words very well, unfortunately. Maybe it's my screen, maybe it's the color of the text. I really don't know, actually. It's unusual, though. I don't usually have that problem, but hopefully this will make it a little bit easier. We are back in the attic again, in the Ashiya living space, or their previous living space. Curator has been found, but he's still hanging out in the bathrooms on the first floor. Because he's not having a very good time after possibly being teleported or time traveling. I don't know, so he's hanging out with Naomi's corpse, just for funsies. Let's carry on, shall we? Curator entered the room where Naomi had died, but he couldn't have unlocked the cabinet. Sai, though, had the chance to do both things. If the search ended while one of them still had the key, since you were in their group, they'd have chosen to leave the key in your purse. Also, you investigated hallway B, so if Sai hadn't denied it, you could have had the chance to get the key too. And then Curator started acting strangely, purposefully remaining on the crystal floor all by himself. Yeah, none of this makes sense because we found the Sekimeiya in the story. This part is what feels like we might have backward. How so? I'm not sure yet because I doubt that there would be any normal method to make the Sekimeiya appear there. Maybe it has to do with its powers. But I think we should look through hallway B in case we find hints of what actually happened. Without an objection, we continued heading down. I wasn't exactly sure what goal we had in mind, but I knew something strange must have happened with the hallway B group. When the Sekimeiya was hidden in room B4, where we first found Naomi, it was hidden inside a temperature regulation cabinet, and that must have happened at a time where we didn't know yet that the cabinets had inner compartments. Anyone could have secretly known this, but think about Katai's perspective. He was told by Sudipo that gemstones had been stolen from a room and he didn't know which one. He had no reason to think that there had been gemstones displayed and not ones kept in the inner cabinets and compartments, right? But the first time we searched, he never looked at them or let us know about them. He might have wanted to keep them a secret. It's possible. As soon as we reached floor 4, we faintly heard someone approaching. Oh hey, were you coming for me? Sort of, the others are waiting for you in the attic, but we'll go right back up in a bit. What were you doing down there? Nothing, as I said. I stayed where I was for a few more minutes, sorting my thoughts out. Any reason why I chose a bathroom with a dead body to stay in? I don't think so. I'll be going. I'm sure Sai's eager to openly question me. Oh, I'm sure he is. He took off without waiting for a response. Maybe he's back to normal. He looked really off earlier. He did. I'm not sure how it was for him, but he must have experienced something very unnatural. We continued moving down as we wondered what had been up with Curator. He only teleported according to him, and the Sekimeiya was the trigger. Do you believe him? I'm not sure. It probably was caused by the Sekimeiya in some way, but right before that point, it didn't have any effect on us. I thought earlier that maybe he just travelled a few seconds to the past, which would have been unnoticeable. Oh, that's true. But he said he still appeared on the crystal floor, so I think he would have noticed it. And we should have seen him. Yeah, maybe the shock stopped him from thinking properly, I don't know. I also wonder why he didn't show himself, if he was right there the whole time and saw us. And there's the fact that if he really touched the Sekimeiya, we shouldn't have seen it behind the glass in the cabinet. Yeah, it's all really strange. I'm already doubting what I said regarding the Sekimeiya's disappearance. I said that if Naomi's killer had taken her key, they would have waited before taking the Sekimeiya. They wouldn't have done it while we've all been searching on the crystal floor. That's slightly flawed though. If Sai or Curator had taken the key, they would have waited too. Yeah. They would have kept the key until a better chance came. Right? But instead the Sekimeiya was taken while the search was going on. Why? There has to be a reason why they didn't wait. After all, the fact that it happened during the search is very strange. It means that nobody who searched could have done it. Whoever hid the Sekimeiya took advantage of the search to appear clean. They didn't wait for a calmer time. It's so confusing. People in both hallways could have worked together when I wasn't looking, but is that really it? It doesn't make any sense. They rushed to hide the Sekimeiya in the storeroom, but they didn't rush to take it out of the cabinet the next time we left the crystal floor. In fact, it should still be there. God, I don't want to baselessly suspect everyone, but I don't know how else to approach this. It's okay, Atsuki. You're just trying to be careful. I wish I could be more help. We arrived at the crystal floor. If a hiding culprit wasn't nearby, we must have been the only people there. It was fainter, but as we walked down the last staircase, we could still perceive the smell from earlier. Perhaps because nothing about it made any sense, we instinctively went to check on the second Naomi body, the place where Arcado had remained. I don't think anything's different here. It looks the same. Someone must have locked her inside, and that was what the sound we heard. If so, then the culprit should still be somewhere while we searched. Well, when we heard the sound, we all went off of the event room toward hallway A. From there, we could see the staircase and the elevator, so we know nobody ran up a floor after that. If the person responsible expected that and quickly entered the event room from hallway B, just behind us, even though we still don't know how it works, they might have been able to use the Sekimeiya to escape. We locked the cabinet, but it's still possible. It supposedly made Arcado travel later, so that could be right. It might just be inconsistent regarding when it actually does something. But then the culprit wouldn't have relied on it to escape. If they used it, they must have known how to trigger it properly. There's still the same problem though. The glass in the cabinet would have been left open. That's right. Maybe you don't actually have to touch it. Maybe it can... Power can jump through... Maybe it travels like light, you know? Like a wave. As the conversation had once again shifted to the Sekimeiya's mechanics, we walked to the centre of the floor. We entered it through hallway B and found ourselves in an empty space, only shared by the covered cabinet. The dark scenery always reminded us that we'd been the victims of an attack, and one that was most likely far from over. I walked up to the cabinet as I spoke. You still have the key? No, it must still be on the bed, assuming nobody picked it up. I didn't want to just put it in my purse. So, what might have been the only way to unlock the cabinet could still be in anyone's possession. I raised the curtain, hoping to finally get more information on what the Sekimeiya could really do. However, instead of helping us piece things together, it appeared the curtains was only covering more questions. Behind it, the glass only protected a cushion, as the Sekimeiya had once again disappeared. It's not here. Didn't you see it before we went up? I did, I even touched it. Then was Arcado just acting? Could have easily taken it out. Unless we assume an unknown culprit is somehow still here, it was him. He did tell us to leave him alone, but I have no idea why he'd want to hide it. The question still pisses me off. Why would anyone hide the Sekimeiya? There's nothing to gain from it because you can always find it just by searching thoroughly. There might be another reason. For example, what if instead of hiding it, what they were trying to do was remove it from the cabinet? Just remove it? Oh, because of the temperature. Maybe. The first time we found it inside a cabinet, that could keep it cool, but it wasn't powered on. It might be related to that. They could just unplug the cabinet, which would have been much harder to notice. By moving it, they also exposed themselves in front of the cameras. I looked behind just in case, and the cabinet's plug was still inserted into the outlet. The cameras make me think that the culprit doesn't mind being seen. It makes sense if it had always been Arcado, because by hiding the Sekimeiya now, he'd leave himself open as the only suspect. But to accomplish everything, he must have made use of the Sekimeiya's powers multiple times, and still did his best to always hide from us. Whoever the culprit is, why do they care so much about not being seen by us, but aren't fazed by the cameras? Yeah, they must have caused the power outage in the security room, but all they did was stop us from looking at the recordings. The cameras are still working, so once everyone outside can get back in, they'll be able to look at everything. It might just have been that they're confident in their plan. If they intend to vanish as soon as Ashiya entered this place, even if they figure out who they were, they'd still be gone and hard to catch. The fact that they're trying hard to avoid being seen by us might indicate that we know them. If they're making use of the Sekimeiya, understand how it works, and are creating an alibi for themselves, we could just restrain them for the rest of the time and figure out who they are. It's like they're hiding the Sekimeiya while also hiding themselves thanks to it. And at the same time, the fact that Arcado is the main suspect could mean that he isn't responsible. Every action performed by the culprit has managed to keep their identity hidden, but this would directly point at it. Even though Katai had always looked like the most suspicious person, he could have accomplished almost everything through normal means. At no point was it necessary for him to use the Sekimeiya for anything, and it's very likely the culprit had been making use of it to stay put out of sight and remain less suspicious. So the blame just falls on Katai. I doubt it's just that. He's still hiding a bunch of things for sure, regarding the Sekimeiya, the attic, and the way we got trapped. For now, since we're here, we could try to find the Sekimeiya. The others must be questioning Arcado, and well, where we are, there aren't many places to hide it, and if we find it, we could learn something important. If Arcado didn't do it, it means that someone else took advantage of him being distracted. It could have been a hiding culprit, but Sai and Katai were actually viable suspects too, as they claimed to have been in the living room, while we'd been occupied by impossible recording. They would have had just enough time. Or would you prefer to go back to the attic? Sorry I dragged you all the way down here without asking you. being alone could be dangerous, so we can go back if you want. No, I'd like to look for it. We're also going to look through hallway B, so let's start with that. If we figure out how the Sekimeiya appeared in the storeroom, we might be able to find out who did it. I nodded. It was possible a culprit remained around, but they could easily have left already, and it wasn't our goal to begin a full search of the building. We intended to find the Sekimeiya, which is more likely to be on the crystal floor. Which room do we start with? It shouldn't matter. I think that's the first one Arcado looked through. We walked to room B3 in silence. It was undeniable that staying put somewhere was much safer than being there ourselves. Someone had died, and we were up against an evasive culprit. We even heard that bizarre recording just minutes ago, but we were trying to understand what had happened to the Sekimeiya. After all, it had made me travel through time. We hadn't spoken about it at length, but it was evident both of us wanted to understand how it worked. We opened the door and entered without high hopes. I started with the rightmost cabinets. Only a few of them could be opened up, but there was always a space behind and under them, making it a considerably lengthy process. Just as I thought that, Shiroya spoke. Wait, it's here! I turned around abruptly. Shiroya was looking inside the cabinet she'd started with. I approached her, thinking that perhaps I'd misheard. Do you mean the Sekimeiya? Yes, look, it's under the cushion. And there's a lot of space beneath it too. I thought I saw a slight bump, so I checked. I spotted it when I got closer. Shiroya had removed the cushion with the gems, which had uncovered the space beneath it. There, the Sekimeiya had been hidden. So once again, out of all the places to choose from, they chose to hide it in a room with security cameras. We'd gotten used to our searches not ending as desired, so such a quick result really threw me off. It must not have been here for very long. What do we do? Do you want to try, activate it? The last time it worked right after it had been hidden. It's obvious that the culprit is behind this, so by learning how it works, we might be able to understand a few things. That's true, but won't it be dangerous? You saw how Arcado reacted? I felt fine the last time. I also touched it before going to the attic and nothing happened, so it's possible it won't be any different now. It might have been dangerous, but I wanted to know if going to the past was truly achievable. I felt overwhelmed by the simple looking object that I had in front of me. I see. Try it then. If it works, I'll go back to the past again, and if that happens, it means that I might already be outside the door, waiting for the past me to travel. Assuming that's the case, I'll come in as soon as I disappear, to meet back with you. Keep looking at the Sekimeiya in case it changes colours. Alright. Was another version of me right outside the room? If we went to look at that version, acted surprised to be found, assuming the past couldn't be changed, and only looked at it from a different perspective. It'd mean that I'd have to travel to the past to recreate a fake action. Such a thing was ridiculous though. If we went to check outside, that version of me would know that we'd done so, and would hide accordingly. It was pointless to even try it, as we didn't know that the travel would work in the first place. I'll touch it. If nothing happens, let's bring it upstairs. Leaving it in the cabinet would just provide the culprit with another opportunity to hide it, assuming it wasn't Arcado's doing. Yeah. I'll wait here. I'm a little scared to touch it, but I think it's better if one of us stays here. I agree. I stretched my arm toward it, hesitant about what was about to happen. Shiroya kept slowly walking backward while I shortened the distance between my hand and the Sekimeiya. As soon as I made the slightest physical contact with it, I felt a ridiculously painful burn on my fingers that didn't even last a split second until I was somewhere else. Man, it seems to work on us really well. Before I could comprehend that it had worked, I fell to the floor and hurt myself. Disoriented, I looked around me. We're in the security room. It took me a few seconds to realize where I was. In front of me were blank screens, and my surroundings were overall dim. It was a security room. My pose had also changed. I'd appeared in front of a desk, and had immediately fallen backwards, hitting my back on the chair. What the fuck? Was I sitting? That was what it had felt like. I'd been sitting on top of nothing, which had resulted in my fall. Oh man, that means the chair teleported as well. I sighed and stood up. It had worked again. It's like a more advanced version of when someone pulls a chair out from under you when you go to sit down and you fall. It's like the universe pulling a chair out from under you when you fall. I sighed and stood up. It had worked again. And that time I'd appeared in the security room. I was about to exit the place when I realized that I had a much smarter option. I dragged the chair I'd knocked away back into its place and sat on it. Then I moved the mouse around to power on the screens. They all lit up at once, which made me squint momentarily. The large desktop appeared, but I only directed my gaze at the lower right of this middle screen. 11:10 was the time I saw. Like half an hour? I did go back to the past once again. This is confirmation that I wasn't going crazy. The last time we checked the time, Sai said it was 11:36, and he'd already confirmed to me that his time is the same as the computer's. I'd estimate that after that point, 15 more minutes passed until I touched the Sekimeiya, which means that I went approximately 40 minutes into the past. 40 minutes. Twice the last amount. Is that a coincidence? It could just be that that amount of time travel is also determined randomly. Or how long the stone's been charging for. I thought earlier that this could be the case with the location you go to, but given I appeared sitting down right in front of this desk, there must be more to it than that. At this point in time, I should be on the 5th floor with Shiroya at 11:20. We were all inside the event room after regrouping, discussing the elevator movements. When we heard a noise, that's right, I can attempt to see what made it, and most importantly, what happened to Naomi. We made the noise, come on. I started getting tense. It was possible a murder was about to occur. We deemed the bathroom empty before searching the other floors, and I was in the time frame where the second Naomi had died. I exited the security room slowly. We searched through the whole floor before going up, so there shouldn't have been a hiding culprit. However, the elevator movement still remained unexplained. Someone had arrived on the crystal floor while we'd been investigating the others. Could I even consider preventing Naomi's death? If casual loops were how the time travel worked, I would be able to. Did I have a way to be sure though? Even though what had happened the first time pointed to the idea that modifying the past wouldn't happen, the only way I could learn that with certainty was by attempting it. Incidentally, by attempting to change the past, I was putting myself at risk. We hadn't found my dead body, so I could feel a bit calm in that regard. However, if my actions could alter the past, that would be invalid. Should I worry about that? If I tried to prevent Naomi's death and subsequently die for it, that could make my time travel an impossibility and lead to an obvious paradox. How would the universe handle that? Would it even allow it? Maybe anything I try to change the past would be completely futile. I just have to wait and see what I can do. From hallway A, I saw people walking down the stairs. I quickly ran toward the lobby, knowing that they wouldn't see me. They've already come, so the elevator movements have already occurred. It's possible Naomi's already dead. Did I appear too late to see what happened? I moved to hallway B. I knew we'd shortly enter the event room through the opposite door, so I'd be safe there. Will they really not see me? I went 40 minutes to the past, and even though nobody claimed to have seen me, it appears I was always on this floor. I approached the bathroom slowly, trying not to make any sound. From the middle of the hallway though, I noticed that something important hadn't happened yet. The door, it's open. We found the bathroom door locked, and inside it had been Naomi's body. Since it hadn't been locked yet, something was bound to happen if I just watched from a distance. Unfortunately, the door was only very slightly open, I couldn't see inside. I kept moving and entered the cleaning room, which would provide me the best way to view the bathrooms without being spotted. A little paranoid, I looked behind me to make sure there was no one else there. Who's going to appear? Will I be able to see the culprit's identity? Naomi might also show up at any moment, but from where? This floor was empty, and the following ones up to the attic were just investigated too. Maybe whoever's about to appear will travel from the future if they haven't been in the attic the whole time. It's unlikely anyone exited the attic through the main door, given the footprints. Even though the elevator should have been on the 5th floor, it was below the 3rd. Someone from the attic could have called it, arrived here, and then set it back up empty. That had fallen into place with what Sai heard. It also meant that person must now be on this floor, and most importantly, that Shiroya and I missed the elevator sound 3 times. Do I accept this as a possibility? Do you have a choice? I kept watching for a few minutes. Eventually, the indistinct voices I'd been hearing faded away, indicating that the group had gone to the event room. That has to happen at any point. We did hear a noise, and the door hasn't been locked yet. I remained motionless, peeking through a small gap of the door. I was about to witness a murder. Would I see a person popping into existence out of nowhere? Where would they go then? If the second Naomi isn't dead yet, both her and her culprit have to come, if one of them is accounted for, given the elevator's movements. But what about the other one? Or were both of them responsible for the elevator trips? Before I could continue imagining all sorts of scenarios, it began. Naomi was coming from hallway C. There she is. Should I show myself? I couldn't decide if that was a good idea. There was still no culprit to be found, so I chose to hold off. Arkado's description of Naomi's face came short of the expression she was wearing. She was very visibly terrified, breathing heavily, moving oddly, and stopping in place every few seconds. Even though I was a fair distance away, I saw pure distress all over her. What had she experienced? Did she know her dead body had been found? Was she perhaps aware of what would happen to her? She must have travelled to the past at least once, or her own existence wouldn't make sense. Finally, after a very long breath that seemed to give her some confidence, she did what I thought she'd do. She headed toward the bathrooms. She opened the woman's and looked inside. It appeared she was searching for something, and given she didn't look around very much, it might have been a person. Quickly, something caught her attention inside the other bathroom. I couldn't know what it was. but as she placed her hand on the doorknob, her stance gave away that she was wary of what lay beyond the door. I hadn't seen anything strange happening in the bathroom since I'd begun watching. Was it possible that someone had been there the whole time? Naomi opened the door carefully, keeping her guard as high as it could have been. I bit my lip tightly. When the door was open, she looked inside. Since the knob was on the left, it was impossible for me to see what she'd seen, but her tension slightly lowered as she saw the contents of the little room. At the same time, mine increased, as I knew what must have been about to happen. I was too far to hear her, but she was speaking. Someone had really been inside the bathroom the entire time. It didn't make sense. The person must have been the source of the elevator movements. So where had Naomi come from? She didn't have the attic key, and she couldn't have come from the future either, as that was about to become impossible. Go over there and find out. Out of nowhere, Naomi's body was pulled from the inside. I felt as if my heart had been pulled along with her. I couldn't see her anymore, and two people were in the bathroom, their figures hidden from me. I'd probably never have the chance to stop it, and the camera must have at least caught the image of her murderer. But during the few seconds that I was pathetically scared without being in danger, I knew that the life of a person was being taken right in front of me. Despite my future knowledge and advantageous position, I hadn't done anything to prevent it. I'd been thinking that at least the culprit would have had to escape in front of me, until I realised how inhumane that was. The universe wouldn't allow me to change the past. That was ridiculous, and if anything, it was providing me with a way to do it. I ran toward the bathroom as fast as I could, and I definitely still had time to change the past. It wasn't too late, and I could trap the culprit inside. It must have been changing the past in some way, as I wouldn't let them escape. No, if you... It's just her in there. That's how the door ended up getting locked in the first place. You locked the fucking thing, with her body inside. The whoever else was there has teleported out already. Man. I don't like that. But that thought instantly vanished when I heard a sound in front of me. Before I could get to the bathroom, the door was forcibly shut from the inside, then locked. Same diff. I recognized the sound as soon as I heard it. It was the one we'd heard from the event room. How? It should have been impossible since the culprit was still inside. However, I didn't have time to think about it. Faster than I'd ever run, I dashed off up the stairs, knowing that in less than a couple of seconds, Edna's gaze would seal off the entire floor. I made it before I was spotted, only because I'd reacted fast enough, but it didn't make any sense. We were going to search through the entire floor and find no culprit. Were Edna and Isla going to let them escape? If so, I was about to see it, and since I was one floor higher, I could hear the elevator too, which was on the crystal floor. Once again I waited, watching over the stairs from afar. However, a couple of minutes later, nobody had gone up. We must have already been next to the locked door, and we would only find Naomi inside. The way we coordinated ourselves back then had been effective. That meant that Edna and Isla prevented me from going down and seeing what had happened to Arcado, which was also something I'd wanted to find out. So by rushing to the door, I didn't change anything. That had always happened, and yet we didn't find the culprit who should have been inside. That's what I thought. The past won't change. As soon as I determined that I was going to do it, I was blocked off from succeeding. Of course, before concluding anything, I have to verify that they truly didn't find the culprit and that everything is happening as I remember. But this means that something happened to the culprit. Did they go back to the past before we found them? They locked the door as soon as I approached it, so they must have escaped after that point. There's a big problem. The Sekimeiya is currently in the event room, but we already have reason to assume, potentially, that there's two of them. There's potentially two Sekimeiyas. And if you can clone shit by transporting shit, like the clothes on your back and the briefcases and shit, who's to say that the Sekimeiya can't clone itself? It's clear that, under some circumstances, it does make you travel to the past, but the culprit couldn't have used it unless we're severely misunderstanding how it works. If touching it physically is a requirement to travel, the culprit inside the bathroom couldn't have used it. Is there any way to get around that? For example, since we had inspected the entire floor, it's very likely that the culprit appeared from the future. Could they have brought the Sekimeiya with them and then used it to escape from the bathroom? I don't know how that would be possible. The Sekimeiya is the cause of the travel, so you shouldn't be able to travel with it. Just wrap it in something, come on now. Or put it in a purse, I don't know. Pick it up with a cloth, put it in your purse. So then what method could they have used to disappear like that? Why'd they kill Naomi? And while we're at it, who the fuck is this person? Someone who will travel to the past. We have that person, Arcado. He's about to travel to the past right now, but for some reason, we won't find him again until later. Did he have a way to escape the bathroom? Was he the one who shut and locked the door before I reached it? My whole body was still tense and I hadn't stopped biting my lip. I couldn't get the thought that I'd let Naomi die out of my head. How is that even possible though? She had died twice. I made a plan in my head. If Arcada was the culprit, he must have been who'd hidden the Sekimeiya while we'd been in the attic. We'd wake up in a few minutes, and I knew for a fact that we wouldn't look through every door. So, as long as I hid myself in a partition, I wouldn't be seen. Afterward, I could go down again and see who had hidden the Sekimeiya. Once more, I'd have a chance to see the culprit firsthand. And if Arcada had been telling the truth, I'd see him for sure, as he told us that he'd seen us inspecting the floor. I recalled our movements downstairs. Edna and Isla had stayed in place, watching the path between floors, while the rest of us moved back and forth between the two rooms with their individual Naumis. Eventually, after exiting the event room, we'd lost track of Arcada. We'd searched through the whole floor after that, and I could attempt to repeat that myself. I waited out the short time before I would have a safe way down. After 4 or 5 minutes, I saw the group coming up the stairs. We were going to the attic, which confirmed that Edna and Isla really hadn't gone anywhere. They'd definitely been watching. I dashed into the partitions to avoid being seen. When the group was gone, I slowly stepped out. Nobody could have passed after them. I'd been watching the glass from the second partition. The crystal floor was isolated, and according to what Arcada had told us, he had to be there. I moved down. I couldn't do an optimal search being only one person, but I should have been able to find someone who wasn't deliberately hiding from me. Arcada had said he'd only teleported. Regardless of the veracity of that, he had to still be on the floor. I opened the door to the elevator, revealing its barren interior. Next, I looked at the bathrooms, which only contained Naomi's body, though I remember having left it, not yet covered by a curtain. That seemed to confirm that I was truly reliving something that I'd already lived from a different perspective. Arcada had said that he hadn't gone up any floors, so even though I couldn't keep track of the entire floor, if I didn't see him, it would strongly imply that he'd been lying. I began looking through every room. I'd seen other people do it, but I'd never personally been the one to inspect. I felt my search was a little paradoxical. If Arcada was in one of the rooms, he would see me, even though he hadn't mentioned it. Despite that, I continued. The cleaning and staff rooms were empty, and so were the first few crystal rooms. Once I entered the event room, I saw the Sekimeiya still there, giving away that it had soon be moved. I continued with the remaining rooms in hallway B, which all appeared empty, even though Arcada's body was the biggest of us all. He could still fit inside a cabinet. It was ridiculous to think he might have hidden in one, but I couldn't ignore them because of that. Someone needs to watch the Sekimeiya and see who's going to move it. You need someone in that room all the time. It's so inefficient having everyone running around the place the whole time. After the mechanical room, I began the hallway A search. A few minutes later, I'd confirmed that I was fully vacant. It was fully vacant, not me. My brain is fully vacant. There is nothing up here. Empty. He'd empty. I knew how suspicious that was. Surely if Arcada was there and he wasn't up to anything, he would have been drawn in by the noise. I should have seen him. Had he seen me all by myself and avoided me? If so, he must have known that I'd be about to travel to the past when he'd seen me and Shiroya heading downstairs, since we told him that we all stayed together the whole time. If he'd hidden the Sekimeiya, we would have given away that we were about to find it, and despite that, he hadn't stopped or questioned us. I moved to the cleaning room again, knowing that Arcada would eventually enter the men's bathroom. Immediately I noticed two things. One, the bathroom door looked exactly like it had when we come back down. We'd seen it look different from how we'd left it. The second thing I noticed was that I'd been responsible for it. I'd looked inside it and left the door slightly more open than it had been. What the hell was up with that bathroom? I knew Arcada would be inside it in a few minutes, but the door threw me for a loop. Unable to piece together what was happening, I stood still, waiting for what was bound to occur. So I had looked at the time at Arcada's request, and at that point it had been 11:36. It's going to be a long 12 hours if we keep reliving the last 40 minutes over and over again. After the time I'd taken to investigate every room, I didn't have to wait very long before I saw the others appearing from the other side of the hallway C. They'd just searched every upper floor after visiting the attic for the first time. I noticed the difference with the bathroom door and went to check it. Inside they saw Arcada. I couldn't just rule out that he'd entered it, but the position of the door indicated otherwise. Something very strange had been going on inside that small room. After a bit, Sai turned around and headed toward the event room. At the same time that Shiroya went to grab a curtain, I reacted fast enough to avoid being seen, but I hadn't anticipated. Regardless, everything was happening just as I'd lived it. What had happened to Arcada? The truth might have been behind his strange words, his lack of time travel. When he disappeared from our side, we hadn't been able to find him. And before that point, Naomi's killer had also vanished completely from the bathroom. and Arcado, who'd been found there, claimed to have only teleported. Properly piecing that all together must have revealed the truth, or formed another piece to place somewhere. But despite thinking that, I couldn't decide whether to suspect him or not, because I still didn't fully understand the way the Sekimeiya worked, and because the little I knew was contradicted by everything I'd witnessed from my new point of view. After my past self went to check the Sekimeiya, everyone but Arcado left. I saw Isla and Shiroya's purses, and they were oblivious to what they were carrying. No matter how much I thought about the abnormal death of the second Naomi, the recording that the four of us were about to hear had remained in the back of my mind. Being abandoned inside the building for a month, and buying into some trick, falling into disarray along with Shiroya, the last thing I wanted was to be a victim of any of that. From that spot, I kept watching. I knew the Sekimeiya would be moved after Shiroya and I returned, and the cleaning room provided me with a way to look at Arcado while listening to the event room, and the room I'd travelled from. If either door was open, I was fairly certain I'd hear it. In a bit more than 10 minutes, I'd reached my present to meet up with Shiroya again. I still had an important chance to understand what was going on, so my thoughts fixated on the culprit, the person responsible for everything. The incident, the two murders, and hiding the Sekimeiya. At first, since we hadn't known what the Sekimeiya had been capable of, we'd heavily considered someone else had remained trapped with us, and that they'd been the main culprit. However, that was no longer as concrete. The culprit had used the Sekimeiya and possessed knowledge of it. I'd been pretty sure of that already, but seeing them vanish from the bathroom had been a strong confirmation. They knew what they were doing, and they were consciously escaping from us. While it was possible that a ninth person was present thanks to the Sekimeiya, it wasn't necessarily the case. Everything the culprit had done could have been done by one of us, as long as they had knowledge of the Sekimeiya's mechanics. Sai had said before that perhaps Katai had been the original discoverer of the Sekimeiya. He could have been the one aware of how it worked, however, he'd continuously told us to keep it in the cabinet, while it had been taken out 3 times already. Power outage, hiding the Sekimeiya in the storeroom, the 2 killings of Naomi, and whatever might have happened in the attic. I still couldn't explain any of it, but something odd had happened in every one of those instances, meaning that the person responsible must have deliberately used the Sekimeiya to their advantage. So then who were they? What was their purpose? I never stopped asking myself that last question. Why had they needed to kill Naomi? Did their bizarre plan involve trapping us inside the building for the next few weeks? There was no way they could accomplish that. I kept reassuring myself. However, it was undeniable that they must have been recorded on camera, and by someone keeping the exits shut, they'd prevent the outside from looking at them. That could have had a lot to do with the access denied message that had appeared at the same time the footage had stopped being recognised. Even though it was clear that Katai was the most suspicious person around us, he had kept getting more suspicious by the second. That's what made me hesitant. I continued waiting. At around 11:50, I travelled to the past, and before that, the Sekimeiya would be stolen and Arcado would leave. At least, I could be calm where I was. I knew Shiroya and I hadn't entered the cleaning room. Like before, the minutes kept passing and nothing had changed. I couldn't see Arcado inside the bathroom, but I knew he was still there. He told us that he'd spent the entire time inside until he departed to the attic. Even though I knew I'd hear it, I kept glancing at the other side of the hallway every once in a while. If Arcado would be responsible for the Sekimeiya's disappearance though, he'd have to move first. I don't know what I was about to see, but in the meantime, the floor was completely silent. There were no traces of anyone else, and Arcado didn't appear to have been lying for the time being. A few more minutes passed. Our past selves were occupied with listening to the recording. However, down on the crystal floor, nothing happened. There wasn't a lot more time left until we'd appear, but I knew for sure that Arcado would first exit the bathroom. Or was that necessarily the case? Had I just experienced someone vanishing from the same bathroom? I started to feel uncertain. Maybe it's not the Sekimeiya that's magic, it's the toilet. But the sensation quickly disappeared. About 8 minutes after the group had disappeared, Arcado did in fact leave the bathroom. He looked tired and still a bit groggy. After breathing deeply, he walked off toward the stairs and disappeared from my field of vision. We told him the elevator wouldn't be functional, so he went up by foot. That meant Shiroya and I were about to head down. Similarly, the Sekimeiya was about to be stolen. Keeping an eye on hallway B, I moved toward the bathroom. As I still felt something was off with it, I quickly saw the big curtain on the floor that Shiroya had brought for Naomi. The culprit had disappeared from the inside and Arcado might have appeared in the same place. I thought that somebody could only travel by making physical contact with the Sekimeiya, so I was interested to see if that could somehow be possible from the bathroom. There weren't many places to check. I looked in the toilet, in the water tank, in the garbage can. I couldn't find anything of importance. No Sekimeiya had travelled from the future, and nothing that indicated how the culprit had disappeared from the inside. Only the Sekimeiya could have made the culprit disappear, and there was no way it had vanished through the toilet. Well, I mean, if they've wrapped it in something, and then activated it, I mean, when you teleport, your clothes are staying, right? You're not appearing naked. So that means anything you're wearing, anything that's on you, is teleported with you. So if you're holding it wrapped in a curtain or wrapped in something and touch it, it's gonna go with you too, right? I don't see the big deal. I was checking the bathroom about 20 minutes after the culprit had escaped it, but that shouldn't have mattered. When we first discovered Naomi's body, nobody could have removed anything. I was the only person to even set foot inside. Then, once we'd started moving through the floor, Edna and Isla had always kept watch from the stairs, so it would have also been impossible. Once the group had moved to the attic, I'd quickly come back from the second floor and open the door to see if Arcado had been present. During that time, there'd been a few seconds where someone could have tampered with the bathroom's interior, but since we just searched through the entire floor, they must have travelled from the future, which was very unlikely. I could justify it like that, but there was hardly any chance of it. After that, I checked every room on the floor. Somebody could have entered the bathroom at that time, but the door hadn't moved when I returned to the cleaning room, and I thought it would have been open wider if someone had gone through it. So it was very likely that the state of the bathroom was identical to how it had been once we found Naomi's body, and that there'd be nothing that could have allowed the culprit to escape. If you could travel back in time and bring the Sekimeiya with you, they could have disappeared with it from the bathroom, but nothing indicated that was possible. Could the key to what had just happened have been removed by Arcado? Whatever it had been, had he left the bathroom with it just then? I'd seen his hands when he walked out, they'd been empty. Besides that, he'd only had a couple of small pockets in his pants. Alright, we're out of time for this episode, so we're going to wrap this one up here. So we did the time travel thing again. So we are absolutely sure now that it does make you travel in time. Maybe the longer it's left out of the cooling, the further it travels you back in time. Or, you know, the warmer it gets. Because being cold seems to stop it charging, right? So maybe it charges with heat. Which makes sense because heat is just energy, right? So maybe it charges with heat. I mean, there are some other stones. There's that stone that gives off like electrical shocks when it's hot. When it's tapped. Something like that. You know, that sort of stuff. So there are some geological things that have different properties when subjected to energy. So maybe it's something like that, because cooling something is just removing energy from it. So, you know, maybe that's it. Maybe that's why they keep it there, so that nobody can use it for time travel, and the person who's taking it out of the cabinet is doing it so that it can charge up so they can use it for time travel. And yeah, like I said, if you have to physically touch the thing to teleport, then it's easy to take it with you. You can wrap it in one of those curtains or whatever, stick it in your pocket. Bam. Sorted. You can take it with you, and you can teleport whenever you want, just by opening it up a little and touching it. Or maybe not, I don't fucking know. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.